it's one thing, like anyone can get a person to be on their show. It's more important that you get someone to come back on your show. I used to get very nervous, like I was about to go on a first date. It was always very much that feeling of, well, I hope this goes well. I hope I'm funny, but not too funny. Did they like me? Do you think that they will come back? There's something about spotting talent, bringing them in, and then just getting out of their way and letting them do it. While the rest of the world is terrorized at the fact of a potential World War III about to commence, wrestling fans in Perth are saying, where the hell was Bret the Hitman Hart? I watched it, and honestly, it's just too confronting. It was, even for me, I just thought, my God, I don't think this is funny. It's just confronting.
Rove McManus, welcome to the Stellar Podcast.
Darren, thank you very much for having me.
This is your first time talking to me on the podcast.
Well, yes, I mean, obviously we have worked together before, but now that the tables are turned, I'm the one answering the questions.
Well, you are currently touring Australia at the moment with a show that's called Tonight's Guest, Rove McManus, Tales from the Talk Show Trenches. So surely, Rove, given that the Stellar Podcast is a celebrity interview format, one guest per week, could call it a talk show version of kind. I feel like this is the perfect place for you to be unpacking some of those tales from said trenches.
Well, I hope that yours isn't as fraught with danger and tales of things going horribly wrong as mine is. But I do know when you're dealing with the technical world as you are, that's usually where most of it can go wrong. And especially for us, we were doing a live show. So as it was going out to everybody as it was happening in real time. But that was part of the thrill of it for me.
Absolutely. And I mean, hence the name Live in Rove Live.
Yeah, it's funny. In the early days, we used to get some members of the press loved to pounce on us if we had a segment that maybe had been recorded earlier in the week, like a guest was pre-recorded. Sometimes they'd be pre-recorded earlier in the day because of time differences, or I'd have to get up at 3:00 in the morning to talk to someone real time in London, that sort of thing, and then we'd play it later on in that episode. Or it was a very clear sketch that we had recorded. We don't leave the studio and suddenly have incredible costumes that have just miraculously appeared and disguises and stuff like that. So that's why when we later on in our final sort of 3 years, we just took the live out of the title just to save ourselves the grief, to be honest.
I mean, I am shocked that you ever got any sort of narky commentary from members of the press. Good thing that doesn't happen in 2026
I know, it's so
anymore.
much easier nowadays, isn't it? Oh my goodness, you can get by with no one having any strong opinions that they need to share, and no one ever finds out what they think. So it's I would much rather be doing it now, of course, absolutely.
Totally. We're also nice now.
Imagine in real time doing a live TV show and you can see comments coming up under the screen. That would be awful.
Well, it's interesting because at the project, I did find that sometimes people that were anchoring that show would check their social feeds or their messages during ad breaks. Did you ever participate in that? You obviously, I mean, just to recap for people, your production company, Roving Enterprises, produced the project, and you would occasionally be there yourself as a co-host. What did you think of that sort of thing?
Well, obviously, because the project was covering news, news involves politics, and that would obviously flare a lot of people up. I would find if I was ever on the show, I would silence all my social media notifications because they would just go haywire during the course of the show, which is also strange because the show itself, for a live show, didn't really engage with social media that much. So it was really a one-way conversation for a lot of it. When we were doing Rove Live, in the early days of social media, mainly, well, even when we first started, so when we first started the show in 1999, I had a laptop on my desk, and we would engage with people at home via a chat room. You could log on to a website, and there was an old school chat room that was a person would moderate it and then put some of the comments up for us to read. And we had some really lovely engagement with fans. We had, before going viral was even a thing, we had a sketch where Peter Helliar was a character who was the guy who invented dances. So the joke was, or the idea was, he was the guy who invented the YMCA dance, he invented the bus stop, he invented the nut bush. It was his idea. And the sketch climaxed with him launching a new dance that he had invented. It was a fictitious dance that we came up with called the etc. etc. It was a ridiculous, you put your arms out straight like you're pretending to be an aeroplane, and you would just squat from one leg to the other. That's pretty much what the dance was. And that's all it was. It was just a funny sketch to show, here's how the guy who invents dance gets them out into the world. People watching at home went to nightclubs to do this dance in public, and they sent us the footage. Now, when I say sent us the footage, they haven't got mobile phones and they can just airdrop it or send it via an iMessage or
It's
WhatsApp.
still dial-up internet, isn't it?
They would have had a handheld video camera. They would take that tape, they would put it in an envelope and mail it to us. And then we would take that tape, put it in a machine and air it on television. And it kind of took off to the point where nightclubs were banning this dance from being done, and people were being evicted if they were kicked out of the nightclub if they did it. That lasted about 3-4 weeks, and all in the most old school, organic, snail mail kind of way, which is really quite incredible considering, we were trying to do what we could to engage with our audience back then in the most organic way possible.
And talk about an early adopter, Rove. When you said that you had the laptop there when the show first started in 1999, it wouldn't be hyperbole to say that would have been very unprecedented, even at a global level. It just wasn't happening.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know that any other show had that. I think it's because we were on, and we were also on at 11 o'clock at night. In future years, we would do things like have a camera that was pointed at a block of flats in a suburb in somewhere around Australia, and we would say to people, if you're watching the show, we had a segment called Flick Your Switch, where we'd say switch your lights on and off and let them flicker, and you would see entire blocks of flats lighting up like a Christmas tree. It was wonderful. Back when we started, we just on one of our early episodes just did a silly idea where we thought, well, at 11 o'clock at night, who's even up and about? And so we sent a camera to a video shop, old school, Blockbuster Video, that was open till midnight. So we just went, who's in renting movies this late at night? And I was just talking to a guy, nothing really that interesting. And then out of nowhere, this other guy comes running into the frame who has a cap with a wig sewn into it, and then in his hand is a bag of other what he called hats with hair. So he was watching the show, realized, oh my gosh, that's the video shop just up the road from me, packed his bag of hats with hair and ran down to try to raise awareness of his amazing product that he had to sell. I mean, that's just incredible. It's just incredible.
I love this. There's also an interactive component in the tour where you do open up the floor, so to speak, and take questions. I don't know if anyone's come racing to the stage with a new invention. I mean, hats with hair,
No,
got to be a revival for that.
We haven't had any prototypes for any amazing inventions, Shark Tank style, for anyone to invest in. After the project, when the show would be off air, we'd chat to the audience and I'd say, does anyone have any questions? And I would invariably get asked about, my talk show days, or I would get asked a question that would lead to a story from those times. And I just found that there was a real appetite for it. So I thought that would be the basis of the show, except I then became concerned that maybe I would just get asked the same thing every night. Like I would almost be guaranteed of being asked, who's your favorite guest? And so I was talking to a friend of mine about it, and he said, well, then what you should do is tell some stories that just cancels out all those questions by talking about who your favorite guest is, or anything else you think might come up. So then that became the thread of the show, where I name my top 5, because it's hard to pick one. I name my top 5 guests, and that's threaded throughout the show. And then each one of those leads to another sort of subject or story or memory. But that's the thread of the show. So I thought, well, that might cover off most of the questions people have. But then, yeah, what happens at the end is really interesting as to what comes out. Sometimes it's a very general question. Sometimes it's very specific. And it's wonderful to have this really unpredictable element to the show right towards the end.
Do you find that there are particular moments that aren't already addressed in the show, whether it is a guest or a viral moment or a particular interaction that you find people really are fascinated by?
Perth in particular, there's a very specific story that comes up around September 11, when the World Trade Center attacks happened. We had finished our show in Melbourne on the East Coast. There's a 2-hour time delay before the show begins in Perth. By that stage, like, we had finished the show, no problem. And then as we're sort of winding down backstage, we noticed that Sandra Sully on the 10 News is reporting that a plane seems to have crashed into a building. And then there was a few ad breaks, and they've come back, and obviously we realised something was going on, and we all stayed at our studio till about 3 a.m. in the morning watching it all unfold. A 2-hour time delay later, Perth gets the show. It's midway, or about a third or a quarter of the way through the show. They go to what should have been an ad break. They get the news that is happening live for us after the show during the commercial break to say something's happening. We'll have more after this. They come back to us. My very light show, I'm probably saying what the and showing funny pictures of things at the time. We go to another ad break. They start getting more information. They come back to us. I was promoting that night an interview with a former heavyweight champion in professional wrestling by the name of Bret Hitman Hart, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. We're promoting it all night. I turn around and I say, we'll be back with Bret Hitman Hart right after this. And then they cross live to the news where it's happening. We know what's going on. It's a full-scale terrorist attack, and away we go. So our show now has finished in Perth. They don't see the rest of the show. The next day, we got so many complaints from wrestling fans saying, I didn't get to see the wrestler last night. You were promoting the wrestler and the wrestler never came on. So while the rest of the world is terrorized at the fact of a potential World War III about to commence, wrestling fans in Perth are saying, where the hell was Bret the Hitman Hart? So that was a topic that came up. It's a very West Australian specific story, but I had a feeling it would come up, and it did.
Even now, 25 years, because Rove, when you said we got a lot of complaints, I'm thinking yes, obviously, because people were saying this was so insensitive, not understanding that it had been a delay and had been recorded live 2 hours early.
No.
I was not anticipating that, by the way.
Where's the wrestler? Where's the wrestler?
And that they can't, and I mean, look, I have family where you are living in Perth, beautiful state. My late mum was from WA, but I love it that they just can't let it go. So big shout out to our
So
call.
I must get that full interview up and online for them, so they can have that sorted for them.
All right. So definitely some highly unpredictable moments. I suppose one that would be more predictable, certainly, that I would ask you about it, talk show trenches. Who are the standout guests when you look back at your years, 25 years of hosting talk shows? Who were the best couple of guests?
As you were asking before, are there ones who come up that people would like to talk about. So as much as I have my top 5, I also, in between that, have other stories that involve some of my favourite guests. Yeah, not surprisingly, there are some comedy people in there, because whenever I got to meet one of my comedy idols, it was a very big deal for me. And as I talk about in the show, I used to get very nervous, like I was about to go on a first date. It was always very much that feeling of, well, I hope this goes well. I hope I'm funny, but not too funny. Did they like me? Do you think that they will come back? I always had just a string of questions to our guest producers afterwards about how it all went. Then there's those who wanted to come and play. Like, I would say, look, obviously we've got a rough plan, but we are 2 grown adults who can hold the conversation. If we go off the rails, I'm very happy to do that. Those guests that wanted to do that and not just keep it loose, but really wanted to play, are definitely ones that come up regularly, probably as a theme with some of these. And then also those who came back time and time and time again. I used to always say, and still do, that it's one thing, like anyone can get a person to be on their show. It's more important that you get someone to come back on your show. That's the real trick. And to do that, you have to be good at what you do. You have to be engaging. You have to be, the guest just has to have a good time in whatever way they interpret that. And when they do that on more than one occasion over multiple years, you start to build a friendship sometimes with some of these people. So there are people on the list who are very much started as a guest but have now become friends, which I'm very pleased to say.
And especially, I think, when you first started in 1999, you probably never foresaw that you would still be in the industry here in 2026, much less that Rove Live would go on to become what it did.
Yeah, sure. And that's the hope, isn't it? When we first started, we did 1 year at Channel 9 and then one season. It wasn't even a full year. It was a season at Channel 9. We got to the end of our contract and that was it. They said, don't worry, we don't want to renew it. And so that was it. And that could have been it. But thankfully, we had the chance to move to Channel 10 and then we were up and running and had a obviously very successful run there. Then I moved to America and had just an absolute ball performing in LA in particular, but then also New York for a little while. But even now, I have had people who have come to the show and have said that it sounds like it's like a farewell or me saying goodbye, when it's not that at all. It really is a greatest hits so far, as it were. And just that, more and more I've been finding people wanting to hear the stories or asking about the stories. So I thought this would be a great platform for it. But to your point, I am still going. I've even recently, put some interviews up online that I'm doing now still. So even one of those was with Benji and Joel Madden from Good Charlotte. And while I was talking to them, I showed them a clip of the very first time that they had toured in Australia, which was the very first time they appeared on my show and the very first time I got to meet them, which was in 2001, 25 years ago. And here we are now. They're a perfect example of 2 guys who, came on the show when they were young up-and-comers. They kept coming back. They became bigger and bigger, but they kept doing the show and we became friends. And even when I was in LA, we would hang out quite a bit. And so it was really lovely to get to catch up with them. And sometimes that's what I miss about doing the show. It was just a good chance to get to hang out with your mates every so often when they were back in town.
Let me ask you, Rove, about pulling together some of the clips, because when you were just talking to the Good Charlotte guys, you look at that clip from 25 years ago, you must think, oh my God, we're all so young. The nostalgia, the sentimentality, the memories, the regrets over fashion choices. How has it been going back and revisiting the archive of clips?
Look, I'm pretty fortunate that I didn't make any really drastic hairstyle choices over the years or like fashion wise, look, there's probably a few missteps, but nothing out of the blue. The main thing is I did post a clip from our very first season in 1999, a sketch that we did with an angry man around the office. And most of the comments were around what can only be described as ludicrously length sideburns that I had at the time. And there's a few clips I do show in my current live show where the sideburns are very evident. It's impossible to hide. And that's probably one of the few fashion regrets I've had over the time. I'm very fortunate that there hasn't been any jokes or ideas that have had to be cut for that reason. There's a sketch I do talk about. There was a segment we used to have called Video Requests, where I with some of our other performers like Peter Helliar and Corinne Grant and Dave Callan would recreate famous music videos. And one of the ones that I talk about is the one for Kylie Minogue's Can't Get You Out of My Head, which was, if you remember, just her pretty much in a white sheet with a white sheet draped over and really not much else. So I was looking for that one thinking, well, that to me is probably a very funny one to show. And I watched it, and honestly, it's just too confronting. It was, even for me, I just thought, my God, even Ruben K would look at that and go, it's too much, pull it back.
Really? Isn't that funny?
And I just went, there's other ones I do show that in their own way are quite confronting to sort of see me in with, different outfits and in drag, which I was very happy to do and probably still am today, let's be honest. But there was something about the Kylie one that even I just thought, I don't think this is funny. It's just confronting.
Because I've often think, Rove, about my career as a journalist and the things that I would ask and talk about, and then I just would never do it now for many reasons.
No, but then what I do bring up in the show is the time I brought it up with Kylie Minogue herself and showed her what I looked like, and her reaction is quite priceless. And and one of my favorite moments in the show, actually, that I do show. I might not show all of my version of her clip, but her reaction is quite fun.
Your show, it really shone the spotlight on a lot of emerging talent, and there were a lot of people that became household names through Rove Live, and then of course when you went on to the project, some of their names have already come up, like Pete Helliar, of course Carrie Bickmore. We've got someone like Sam Pang now playing in the talk show comedic landscape in Australia. Do you think that it's become more difficult for people to get those opportunities now that we don't have something like Rove Live being broadcast into living rooms?
I think so. One of the things I do talk about in my current show is that a big part of it that I was most proud of is that we were a platform for stand-up comedians. Of course, I make mention of, as we talked about before, I got to meet some absolute idols of mine, from Robin Williams, Eddie Izzard, Billy Connolly, Sarah Silverman, so many, too many to mention. But more importantly was friends, peers, colleagues, people that I just saw in stand-up clubs when I would be gigging. We had an opportunity and a platform to say to them, hey, do you want to come and show people how funny you are? And there's not really anywhere like that anymore. There's shows where comedians can go on panel shows or quiz shows, and there's other ways that they can be on television and be funny. But that idea of, if you are a stand-up comedian and you want to show people what you do, which is stand-up comedy, there's not apart from highlight specials of the actual comedy festival when the gala is on and stuff like that, there's no you can't do stand up on television, and that is something that I think is really sad and quite lacking. It would be nice to sort of have that opportunity for comedians, let alone those that also I got to work with, people who, that's how I started way back when. Was I was asked, who do you want to work with? And I rattled off some names, and they said, well, we struggle to get comedians on the show. And I said, well, that's probably because you're asking them and not me. Like, I think they'll trust if it's me asking that we're going to be doing the right thing and that they'll be listened to. And so, that's the first thing I thought of was, well, I was going to get Pete Helliar on because he was one of the funniest guys I know. Dave Callan, who was like still my dearest friend through comedy. Corinne Grant, Carrie was just absolute luck with one of our producers, was listening to her on Nova Radio and went, hey, there's this girl who's on with Dave Hughes and Kate Langbrook in the morning, and she's pretty good. We had auditioned almost every comedian we could think of for the role of our news person. And everyone was just leaning into the jokes too much. We just needed someone to play it straight. And we got Carrie in, and she did one audition, and we went, she's perfect. And she started that week, and to this day, you can ask her, she had no idea what she was doing. She didn't understand what the role was or the brief was. And in the early days, the pretense was she was in the Channel 10 newsroom, not in the studio with us. So she was kind of just out on her own with a green screen in the studio, but no interaction with me. So the very first time she did it, she's just kind of out there on her own, but she absolutely nailed it. So that is also something that, I do miss a little bit, is not only having that opportunity, but then getting to play with some of my absolute best friends.
From that moment, that audition with Carrie, as you say, really by her own admission, had no idea what she was doing. And then in January of this year, Rove, she's there as a finalist for Australian of the Year.
Yes.
Of course, one of the most beloved names in the country, was at the project for a long time. Again, who would foresee the sprinkle of the fairy dust?
Yeah, but also, there's something about spotting talent, bringing them in, and then just getting out of their way and letting them do it. Don't try to change them. Don't try to mold them. Just, you can hone them maybe if they're slightly inexperienced, but for the most part, it's just have faith and back them. And that's another big thing at the moment too, is just that idea of whoever it might be, networks, heads of networks. Well, it's all studios now. Everybody's owned by some international conglomerate. If you said yes to something, then support it and back it. And our first year at Channel 10 wasn't great. We didn't necessarily set the world on fire, but there was something there. And the network then, in particular, the programmer David Mott, had faith in us, and he backed us. And to get to pay that forward is really cool. I remember where I was when I was in New York working on a show when Carrie won gold, and I was in a cafe and was walking at breakfast, just refreshing my phone to sort of get the live results, and saw that she had won, and then was walking back across the Brooklyn Bridge, and was getting saw all the comments that was being made about her speech, and I didn't quite understand what that obviously was quite impacting. So I was in the middle of the Brooklyn Bridge and got a pretty decent signal and just stopped and watched her incredible speech where she kicked off her charity, essentially, with Beanies for Brain Cancer, was in that moment. And it was one of those very genuine, I remember where I was times in my life. And I really felt the tyranny of distance, that I couldn't have been there to properly share that with her, but I was from very far away.
And then a year after Carrie won, that was 2015, Waleed Ali won in
Yes.
2016. Another example of someone that was discovered for mainstream Australian television. Obviously, Waleed had a very successful career, but people like Waleed and Carrie and Pete Helliar, Georgie Tunney, who was recently on the Stella podcast. I mean, there's so many of them, Rove. Do you feel a sense of pride? That was somebody that really broke the mold, which is a terrible cliche, but it is true in terms of what
Yeah.
a presenter might look like on commercial
Yeah,
TV.
Waleed was kind of one of the last real decisions I made as a boss in inverted commas on the project. So we said goodbye to Charlie Pickering, the initial host. I came in as an interim host for a few months while we were trying to work out who would be next. And when the shortlist came down, it was pretty clear that Waleed was the best person and was a really perfect fit for what we had with Carrie and with Pete. So after that, it was kind of, I didn't need to do much, and obviously what he brought to the show, and I think just the public discourse nationally was really, really important. And one of the sad parts of the project finishing when it did was that I felt like we hadn't quite managed to get the momentum I had hoped for our Friday show with myself, Georgie Tunney, and Susie Youssef. So we had just started a bit of a rebrand on the Friday show where it was just the three of us. It was a bit of a lighter tone, and we did have plans of what that could become long term. And it's a shame that we didn't get to do that. And more than anything, I just miss hanging out with them on a Friday.
Well, never say never. I was going to ask you about how you felt about the outpouring of love and grief in a lot of ways when it was announced that the show was going off air. And then I suppose your view of countering that with the fact that there'd been incessant grumbling and whinging. I mean, I was joking earlier about who would have thought that you ever dealt with negative commentary early on. But there was just as you said, people used to say, oh, Rove Live isn't really live. Look at that bit. That was clearly pre-recorded where they went outside. The project was such a high-profile scapegoat for so much angst and criticism. But now it's gone away. Everybody is still feeling the void. I mean, literally.
Oh, sure. I still get people will come up to me and tell me how they missed the project. And equally, I talk about in my show when I finished up my show in 2009. It's a sort of an odd thing to talk about because it wasn't the finish. I'm still going now in a different guise, as it were, or a different sort of outlet, and then obviously had a big chunk of time in the US where I was working there, and like you say, actually on the Tonight Show for a number of years. But I do appreciate that for a lot of people, finishing up at Channel 10 for them was probably some of the last of me in that role that they got to see. So I make sure that I mention that. And at the time, it was a really special moment in its own right, that because, again, we were a live TV show, people got in their cars and they drove to the studio to be part of this moment, because I don't know if people remember it, but it was like a very well kept secret. There was myself, my manager, and my wife who kind of knew, and this was really only a few weeks out. And then that very quickly rippled out to people in the office and our cast. But for the most part, like, as I'll say on the night to the audience in front of me, for all of you, it would have been the night of. There was no Oprah, Ellen, Stephen Colbert, I've got 12 months and, it's a lap of honor, so appreciate it while you can. I started the show and I said, this is not just the last show for the year, it's my last show ever. So that one was quite impacting. But it's nice that even now in all of the examples there that people look back on it fondly. And that's part of it too, is it's nice that people look back on it with a sense of fondness and positivity, as opposed to, well, geez, I wish it had ended like 5 years earlier. It's about time someone took this thing out the back of the shed and just humanely put it down, type of thing.
I wanted to ask if you road test material at home. Your wife, Tasma Walton, when she spoke to Stella late last year when she released her novel, she said you were the only person outside of her publisher that she trusted to read it. Do you return the favour? Does she get to weigh in on something that you're playing with, an idea, and you find that you're practicing routines for her and your daughter Ruby when you're unpacking the dishwasher, for example?
I don't practice routines to them, thank goodness. I think that would be a bit too much. There is something about being in a house with a fellow performer, as much as, now Tasma is doing incredibly well as an author as well. Obviously, acting is her real passion. So there's something in the fact that if we walk into a room, there's a very real chance you'll find your partner just pacing around talking to themselves. So, she'll be running lines for something, or I'm running through a routine. So you don't suddenly start going, what are you doing? That's really weird. I think if the other person was in a completely different line of field, that would be a line of work that would be very different. Or we just flat out say, hey, I'm going to be talking to myself in my study for the next 15 minutes, so please don't come through. I will sometimes run a premise by her. There's maybe been 2 occasions that I can think of off the top of my head where there's been a routine based around a story or a moment that's happened with her and directly references her, that I just ran by her to make sure it was okay. But otherwise, it's really just the poor thing. She'll just be at home late at night, staying up till I come home from the comedy club, and she'll just foolishly ask me, how did it go? And then, like a kid on a sugar rush, I'll just blurt out, it was really great. And then I said this, and then they all laughed, and then this happened, and oh my gosh, and I tested this new bit, and it went really well. And it just keeps going and going and going. And I can just feel her, slowly her eyes are starting to close as she regrets even asking the question in the first place. But I do know watching me do stand-up is difficult for her. Even as a performer, she says it's like watching a magician saw a person in half. She knows there's a trick, but there's still that fear of something could go wrong. And so she finds it very uncomfortable. But then my daughter Ruby came to the show, to the tonight's guest, and it was really lovely because I think it was the first time she got to see properly what Dad does. She gets it when I say I have to go away for work, and her response is it TV work or telling jokes to strangers work? So now she sort of understands the TV side of it. It was very sweet. I think she was quite proud in her own little way. She's 12 now, so I think was probably a good time for her to come and see it. And in the question and answer segment, she asked a question, and it completely stumped me. She asked about what was my favourite themed show, and I had a moment of thinking, oh, geez, I don't remember having many themed shows. It wasn't really a big calling card necessarily. And then I realized, oh no, we did shows where we went to people's houses. We did one in a street. We did one for Mother's Day. I was like, oh my gosh, the Mother's Day one. So I started telling that story, and then mentioned how we had Pete's mum on the show. We had Carrie's mum, and Hughesy's wonderful late mum Carmel was on the show as well. Everybody had, Hamish and Andy sent their mums out and did a hidden camera prank. And then I closed by saying, and my mum, and then I leant in and looked her dead in the eyes and I said, your grandma co-hosted the show. And the audiences erupted as they realised who this small child was, and I could see them all fidgeting in their chairs to get a look at her. But I assumed she was sitting next to my mum, and I assumed that my mother was the one who had prompted her to ask the question, but apparently not. It was all her own doing. So Having saved it to the end, I nearly completely fell flat on my face going, oh my gosh, I actually don't have an answer for this. So she can never come back to the show again.
No, she's banned.
No,
Otherwise, she'll have to.
her questions are too tricky. She's too tricky. She should have run it by my people.
She'll have to vet the question past you. Wrap up. One of the questions I was going to ask you was, what would you ask yourself, whether it's me interviewing here for the podcast or when it is the interactive component of the show? What would you ask Rove McManus?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I would probably. Oh geez, I know too much. That's a difficult question. I feel in a very broad sense it would be how much longer? Like, because I probably do ask myself that on a regular basis, and I'd like to just keep doing it as long as I can. I know the days of, every week of the year, that's 40-something episodes, for 10 years would probably never happen again. So, and to be honest, at this stage in my life, neither do I really want it to be. But I do love it. I really sincerely do love it. I love sitting down and chatting with people, and I love being in front of an audience. And when you can combine all of that, it's a very special thing. So, I would again say to that me in the audience who has asked that question, here's hoping I can do another one of these in potentially another 25 years or so, and I'll have plenty more stories and clips to tell. I could probably just beam it into the microchip in your head by that stage. Who knows?
It will be so advanced. We'll be looking back at the moments from this year thinking, oh my gosh, we had no idea what we were doing back in 2020. What is that thing that she's wearing?
I hope I've added more drag to the playlist by that stage as well.
I mean, how could you not?
I got to get my drag points back up.
Final question then, actually, in the course of researching this, Rovo, Walkley Award level question coming up here. How many people do you think know what your real name is? Your birth name, John Henry Michael McManus. Mm-hmm. So not a Rove there. I believe that was the handiwork of a sibling, which gotta love siblings giving us nicknames.
Look, yeah, it's a very. I don't know how else to put it. It's a boring answer. It's other than saying yes, not my real name. Sorry, Rove is not my real name. But having your real name is a perfect alias when you're booking into a hotel or something like that. And as far as the Rove part of it, there is a lot of debate as to where it came from, and no one seems to know the answer, but it's what everybody calls me, including my own daughter, and it's what I feel most comfortable with, so that's what I go with.
Because it was a question on Millionaire Hot Seat at some point. It
was, and no matter how many times it comes up, I get asked about it a lot. It is always everyone's first time finding out. But yeah, that's it. That's really all there is to it. It was when I started performing, I didn't want to use my real name because I was only 2 years removed from high school when I started doing stand-up. So I started performing under my nickname, and which was the name that everyone in my inner circle called me anyway. And then obviously that became the name that everybody started to know me as. So I was very happy with that anyway.
It would have been a very unwieldy name of a show if you'd kept the original name.
John Live would be very dull. No, I do remember having John Wood on my Channel 31 show back in the day, and him saying, "Oh, Rove's a very strange name," and I said, "Oh, well, my real name is John," and he lent it and he said, "There's enough Johns already. Stick with Rove."
Yeah, there you go. Well, because my question was going to be, now that you're in your 50s, would there be an era where you would professionally revisit John Henry Michael McManus? But
no,
like
I dislike the name intensely. So no, absolutely no way at all.
Rove, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Rove is currently touring his new show, Tonight's Guest, Rove McManus, Tales from the Talk Show Trenches Around Australia. We'll have a link in our show notes to where you can buy
Thank God for
tickets.
show notes, right, everybody?
Hope to see you back on the East Coast again soon, which we of course will at the show. So take care, Rove. Thanks again.
My
for your
pleasure. Thanks
time.
very much. Bye.